Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Starting Small. I'd like to say thank you to this episode's sponsor, Basic Rights. Basic Rights is founded in New York City and designed in London. What I like about Basic Rights is their clothing is very stylish and fits great, along with their focus on sustainability. They have partnered with Trees for the Future in 2019 to offset our carbon footprint by planting a tree for every item sold. To this date, they have planted over 15,000 trees, and you can find them at us.basicrights.com. That's us.basicrights.com, and enjoy the episode. Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Starting Small, a podcast about brand development, entrepreneurship, and innovation in the modern world. In this episode, I'm joined by Ajay Kori, founder of Allay Lamp, a therapy lamp for migraine sufferers using a patented narrow band of green light discovered by Harvard neuroscientist Dr. Rami Burstein. Listen as we talk about Ajay's upbringing, education, and his overall inspiration towards his entrepreneurial journey. Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Starting Small. Today, I'm joined by Ajay Kori of Allay Lamp. Ajay, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me, Kim.
Of course. So I want to start out with your upbringing. So where did you grow up, and what was your childhood like?
Yeah, so I grew up between Florida and North Carolina, actually. So I spent my lower school, middle school years in Florida, and my high school and college years in North Carolina. And though those are very different places, there's one commonality between the both of them, and that was that I was a huge nerd. So I lived a program at the University of South Florida, was where my dad worked at the time when I was in middle school, and loved everything about programming since then. Designed my first website when I was in Florida. Moved to North Carolina. Website came with me. Still spending most of my days in front of the computer, and during the dot-com boom, actually, created one of the most popular websites in the world at the time, and eventually sold it to one of two publicly traded companies trying to buy me.
Wow, that's amazing. So how did you learn how to program if you didn't attend a university at that time for that?
I want to say it's because I was just really passionate about it and encouraged to do it, and all these other things. But there was and that is true. But there was also a little bit of like, I wasn't the most popular guy in middle school. I had I was a nerd, and programming seemed easier than figuring out how to like be social. Have a large group of friends, and so I just kind of fell into it, and I had a passion for it. Thankfully, today I know how to be social.
Gotcha.
It was a forcing mechanism at the time.
So I saw in 2002 you went on to study at Duke University. What did you study there?
Yeah, so I studied actually a couple different things. So I was kind of fortunate in that I knew exactly what I wanted to do after college, and that was create more websites, create startup companies. And so I had the freedom to kind of just study whatever really interested me. And psychology was something that really captured me. And it was related to, the businesses that I had started before. The website I had that eventually sold was literally like dancing cartoon characters and some of the dumbest things on earth. And it was, one of the things that we had was the world's largest repository of chain letters. One of the ththings we had was one of our most popular features actually was the online fortune cookie, where you typed in random things about yourself, and it gave you, it told you a story about yourself. And that got passed around to millions and millions of people. It was essentially BuzzFeed before BuzzFeed existed. This idea of like what draws people to share something, what draws people to like, visit a site and tell all their friends, that was really interesting to me. And I had kind of stumbled upon it with, the websites that I built, but I didn't really know why, the psychology of why people were sharing it and why people do what they do ended up becoming something that I became really, really curious about. And I, that was what my major was. Haven't, done anything in formal psychology ever since, but that knowledge of being able to understand, why people buy what they do, why people do what they do has stayed with me my entire career and been incredibly beneficial.
For sure. So, with your time at Duke, were you a part of any athletics or clubs during this time?
I was just did intramural stuff, but
Hmm.
I mean, you can't take the startup or the tech out of me, and so I ended up becoming kind of the CTO of the student body my junior year, and stayed
Okay.
on my senior year. We really kind of pushed the envelope, sometimes a little too far.
Yeah.
We were actually going to become the first school to put GPSs on their buses, so that you knew exactly when to go to the bus stop and how far away the bus was. And we got Garmin to essentially do it for free, as part of a pilot program so that they could roll it out to other universities, and got everyone on board until Duke Transportation essentially shut it down at the last minute because they didn't want people knowing how late their buses were running.
Man.
So it was a great experience because like we were like, the technology is great, the application for students is great, and it's like a no-brainer, except we didn't factor in the political implications of people who have jobs that are going to have a new metric that they're going to be judged by that they perhaps don't want to be judged by.
For sure.
And so it was a great lesson, I think, for our entire group of students that I built that organization around. That it doesn't always just come down to the technology. It also, the practical applications, ironically, the psychology behind
Yeah.
also matters, whether something gets implemented or not.
So that's wild you mentioned that. The high school I went to a few years back, we actually had a software where we could track the buses. And I'm just curious if like that has any influence of the work you have previously done, or I don't know if your work directly led to that. Were you guys the first branch of GPS tracking buses? Do you know?
We were. So Garmin was literally developing an entire division around it.
Wow.
And so this was back in 2004. So it was
Yeah.
quite early, well before smartphones existed. This was all a web application
Hmm.
that would show bus times. And so it was absolute. I tried to build an organization as the CTO of Duke Student Body is the most forward thinking possible, and
Hmm.
so we were truly at the forefront of this. I don't know if it directly led to your high school's
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
GPS, but it definitely was. This was Garmin's first. They were building an entire division around it. They built an entire division around it. They
Wow.
ostensibly went to another school with the entire solution that we had built after we pulled out.
Gotcha. So I saw in 2009 you went on to Harvard for your MBA. What was your experience like at Harvard during that time?
Yeah, it was an incredibly amazing experience. But
Hmm.
I came in, as someone who had started a website with dancing cartoon characters, and that was my success, at least before college. And then, after college, still being kind of a startup-y guy, I came in with kind of a chip on my shoulder, or really, I felt like I had something to prove because I was like the admissions mistake. And so I did some incredibly stupid things, like running for my section's presidency, which I won, which is a complete sucker's job. I mean, I love doing it. I love my section. I love the people, but it is a lot of work.
Yeah.
And I just took on a lot of different things to kind of prove that I belonged at Harvard.
Hmm.
And it was only years after that I realized that I had always belonged. But I think I think I spent too much time while I was there trying to prove to really myself, that I belonged, and it held me back from doing some things that I think just even taking more advantage of the situation of being there. But that all being said, it was an amazing experience for me, and the people I met are some of the most important people in my life.
Yeah. So some of the other guests I've had on, they have stated that their MBA program offered an amazing chance at an entrepreneurship project. I was wondering, with Harvard, with your time there, did you ever take part in any notable entrepreneurship projects during your time?
Yeah, I did. And that was the main focus while I was there, because again, been extremely lucky since essentially middle school, known
Yeah.
what I've wanted to do with my life. And so I did. I took part in the Harvard Business School contest. Actually, on the nonprofit side, so we created a FOPSI, which apparently is not a term that people use anymore. Thankfully, I think, but it stands for profit social enterprise. And so not nonprofit, but social impact driven, but also can be profitable, which I think a lot of people still feel is the proper way. If you really want to impact someone, you make it a profitable business, because you're just able to attract investors and talent better that way.
Yeah.
So we teamed up with a couple people who had spent a lot of time in Tanzania, and essentially built this kind of all-star team of a couple MDs, a couple people who spent a lot of time in Tanzania, and myself, who was kind of the tech person on the team. And we essentially created an organization that allowed people in Tanzania to sell water using their smartphones. So as you may know, access to water is one of the biggest issues in Dar es Salaam and in other parts of Tanzania. I think it's much better now, but back then in 2010, it was one of the main things holding back the population from just living a good life. And there are tons of micro entrepreneurs who wanted to sell water. The problem is that the cash system there didn't allow for it to proliferate. These micro entrepreneurs able to proliferate and sell water on the scale that's necessary to really reach all of the population. So we came up with essentially a mobile platform that allowed these sellers to not only get financing so they could get their water up front. And it's more than just, obviously the water is not what's expensive, it's the transportation to the villages and all that kind of stuff. So to finance their transportation, their apparatuses for selling the water, and a way to accept payments from people buying it in a very seamless way that was completely mobile focused. It was very, again, smartphones had only been around for a couple of years at this point. So it was very cutting edge, and it made a huge impact over there in the distribution of water. So we actually won the Harvard business plan contest. We beat a startup that now a lot of people know about called Birchbox. Haley was there pitching it. And I remember it, and she was like, I knew it was so good. And I was like, this is a great idea. And we ended up beating her, and obviously she had the last laugh. And just rightfully so, because she's a phenomenal entrepreneur, and it was a phenomenal company. But yeah, we ended up winning the Harvard Business Plan contest with that Tanzanian micro payment company, and actually they wrote a case about it that is used for first-year accounting students now every year. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. So prior to Allay, what kind of jobs were you working following college at this time? We talked about other ventures that you have founded, but were there some corporate jobs as well?
Well, sort of. So when I was about to graduate, I was actually going to start a men's clothing company, very similar to Stitch Fix, but for the male side. And Katrina was actually, a friend, and we were both on a trip to Africa talking about it. And as she was talking about, what she wanted to do with Stitch Fix, or what became Stitch Fix, I was just like, wow, she knows a lot more about the fashion industry than I do. I don't know if I should be doing this. And I went and talked to one of my entrepreneurship professors, and he took one look at the way I dressed, and he was like, you should not be doing a fashion startup. And he was absolutely right. I mean, when you start a company in an area, you are married to that for a long time. And you are day in, day out doing that. And I had no passion for fashion. The reason I wanted to start it was because I didn't have a passion for fashion. I wanted to, create something, similar to what is now Trunk Box, where you really help men dress. But to help men, dress better, you need to know something about fashion, and I didn't. So he gave me one of the best suggestions I've ever gotten in my life, or some of the best advice I've ever gotten. Go find an entrepreneur that you really, really respect. Go learn from them, and then start a company when you have an idea that you want to be married to. And so out of pure luck and through the HBS network, I ended up finding Mark Lori, who at the time had started a company called diapers.com. The company is called Quidsy, but their most famous site was diapers.com. He's one of the most brilliant entrepreneurs I've ever met in my entire life. People talk about Jeff Bezos being the pinnacle of e-commerce. I think there's two people in that category. It's Mark Lori and Jeff Bezos. Obviously, Mark has had quite a lot of success as well. He ended up selling Quidsy, the parent company, diapers.com, to Amazon for $600 million, and then sold Jet.com to Walmart for $3.5 billion. And so they brought me in, and I was very upfront that I'm an entrepreneur, and they were like, "That's perfect. We want to start a pharmacy. Both we nor Amazon have ever started a pharmacy before, so we want an entrepreneur to do this. And so we'll make you a deal. You come in, start the pharmacy as almost a startup within the company, and we'll mentor you for 2 years. Then we'll all go off and start our own companies in 2 years." And it was the best deal I've ever taken. Got to learn directly from Mark and Vinny, and they're brilliant people. And you can boil down a lot of how they've been so successful to one simple fact that you need to think long term. You need to always think about the customer.
For sure.
So Amazon acquired Quidsy and diapers.com because they were beating them at selling diapers, which is otherwise a commodity. And our moms didn't go anywhere because even when Amazon sold diapers cheaper than us, because they knew that the customer experience when they bought on diapers.com was above and beyond. If FedEx UPS screwed up the delivery, we would literally hop in a car and drive the diapers to them. And so they knew when they bought from us, they would have the best experience. And if you're a busy mom, that's really incredibly important. So customers end up sticking with you longer. And very importantly, they also do your marketing for you. And that is their entire structure has never been more relevant than it is today, where our channels are incredibly crowded. The barriers to entry on Facebook and AdWords and even Instagram ads are pretty low at this point. So there's a lot more competition. And so CPAs continue to go up as more people jump in. But the kind of secret sauce that I feel like still people really don't understand that Mark and Vinny really figured out is that if you have the best possible experience for your customers, they're going to do your marketing for you. And that CPA is zero. And that will blend down every other ad channel that you have. And so everything that I've done since with UrbanStems, with Allay, has really been built on this premise that if you create the best possible experience for your customers, it is a little bit more expensive up front, but they churn a lot less and they do your marketing for you. And so the bigger the wedge you drive between your CPA and the lifetime value of that customer, the more profitable you are, and the more successful an e-commerce business you have. And those two things don't always. The reason why I think a lot of people don't realize this still today is because those two things are long trail indicators. Like measuring lifetime value takes years. COA is very simple to measure on a Facebook conversion, but very hard to measure when you blend in word of mouth. And so, I have seen firsthand how much investing in the best possible customer experience pushes down your COA, pushes up your lifetime value. And so I had the faith to be able to always do that upfront, even if those metrics don't show up for a couple of years.
So I'm really fascinated with UrbanStems. So in 2013, you founded UrbanStems, a flower delivery service. What made you enter this industry specifically after all of this experience in e-commerce, which has definitely benefited this side?
Yeah, so I was, when I was at Quidsy, I was living in New York and I was dating someone at the time who was a doctor in Philadelphia. And so both of us were incredibly busy and in this 3-year long distance relationship. So as you can imagine, I sent a lot of flowers when I couldn't be there. And I just had bad experience after bad experience. And I thought I was just getting super unlucky. And it finally crescendoed on her birthday. I sent her a bouquet to surprise her. And it by like 5 p.m., it still wasn't there. And I called the company at the time, which I sent it, which was FTD, and they said, oh, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. By 7 p.m., it still wasn't there. I had held off on calling because I wanted the flowers to surprise her. And I called FTD, and they're like, no, we promise it's coming. By finally 11 o'clock, I gave up and called to a very angry girlfriend who I had avoided talking to the entire day because I thought flowers were going to be there to surprise her. And which, to be fair, is completely my fault. But after that, I was like, you know what? There's something wrong with this industry. I can't be this unlucky. And I looked into it and did some research and realized that it was a very common experience. In fact, online floral delivery is dead last in customer satisfaction out of all categories of e-commerce. And so this contrast, this juxtaposition of being at Quidsi, where we were literally beating Amazon because and acquired by Amazon because we had the best possible experience for our customers. And then this industry that just got away with having the worst possible experiences for our customers was too strong for me not to want to jump in and do something about it. And so we came in and essentially revamped the entire way the floral industry is done. FTD 100 Flowers completely based on a wire system that they take your order and then they send it to a florist to actually fulfill. We're fully vertically integrated. We own every part of the process, including when you order in DC and in New York, it's biked to you in an hour. And those couriers are our employees who have benefits, and they're not even contractors. They're full-on employees.
So do you guys grow your plants, or is this outsourced? Because you said you're doing 100% in-house pretty much for the most part for the flowers.
So we've invested in farms. We dictate what's being grown at the farms so that there's less waste. The bouquets are actually being put together in a lot of instances at the farm level. So it's truly fully integrated.
So same day delivery, NYC and DC, what does the shipping process look like when you go nationwide then? How do you preserve the flowers?
Yeah, so we just invested in technology to have the best possible customer experience. So we're shipping from one of 8 warehouses nationwide so that it's not going more than a couple hundred miles to get to you.
Okay.
And the box, the flowers, how quickly they go from being cut off the stem to our warehouse then to you is greatly reduced from the typical supply chain. So not only is it out for delivery when it leaves our warehouse, it's getting to you in under a day. So it's free overnight shipping for everyone. But it's also it's been at our warehouse generally for only a day or two. So typically when you're picking up flowers from a florist, it's been off the stem for a week and a half to 2 weeks. When you're ordering from us, even with nationwide delivery, it's been off the stem for only a couple days. So you're getting the most of the life of the flower with the consumer, which again, best customer experience, always win at the end of the day.
For sure. So moving on to 2019, we hop into Allay Lamp. The idea was first evolved with Dr. Burstein. I was wondering, how was the idea presented to you at this time?
So I had a little bit of a kind of insight into this because my dad is also one of the foremost migraine specialists in the country as well. And he's been friends with Dr. Burstein for a long time. And so when we're up in Cambridge one day, Dr. Burstein said, hey, come to my lab. I just want to show you something that really has astounded all of us. And we're not quite sure what to do with it. And that was, I walked into essentially a green room and I was like, what am I looking at here? But as we stood there for a while, I did start to feel more calm. And then obviously he explained, the research he did starting with blind patients and, trying to understand why blind patients feel worse in light. Everyone knows that migraine patients feel worse when they look at light. But he, as he tried to understand it, he brought in blind patients who, who can't tell that a light is being shown on them, but their headache is getting worse. So clearly there is some, physiological mechanism from your eyes to your brain that disproportionately affect people with migraines. And as they studied it more and more, he found this really surprising conclusion that it's not all light. It's the different colors of light do different things to your brain. to everyone's brain, not just people with migraines, but especially people with migraines. And
Yeah.
he found that, this pretty incredible finding that blind migraineurs, when shown green light, or this very narrow band of green light, have no idea what color light or even that light is being shown on them, but their headache gets better. And so that was kind of the jumping off point to a lot of research, which, culminated in the Allay Lamp.
Wow, that's so fascinating. So when you walked in that room, there was no like prototype of a lamp. It was just green light. What did the light look like? Was it like surrounding the room?
So essentially Dr. Burstein, it's 10 nanometers of light. So it's a very specific
Yeah.
spectrum of light, and there was no commercial device at the time that could produce that. And so the way he had produced it for his studies was he used a medical device, a very precise ophthalmology device that cost $50,000. It's called a color dome. To produce this light both in the room and in this like dome that you stick your head in. And so it's a medical device that's used for a lot of different things, and obviously very, very expensive. And so that's how he had used it. And that was essentially the question to us was, his lifetime of work has been making people's lives better who have migraines. It's 40 million people. It's just an incredible disease. It affects about 10% of our population worldwide, including here in the US. And for those 10% of people, their day just ends when they get a migraine, and there's no cure. And the fact that this exists, people like my dad and Dr. Burstein are true, saints, I think, in that they've dedicated their entire careers trying to help these people. And so when, Dr. Burstein figured out that this spectrum of light could really help people, his entire goal and the entire reason he brought me in was how do we bring this to as many people as possible? How do we get this in the hands of as many people as possible? Because the current device I have is $50,000. That's not going to work. And so we engaged with a former, the scientist who actually built the lights on the International Space Station. Went out and figured out how to manufacture this in a consumer device that is today the Allay Lamp, $150. That's accessible to everyone.
Wow. So is there such thing as too much exposure to the lamp? Like, could it be harmful to be too close for an extended period?
No, I mean, you're exposed. I'm assuming where you're sitting right now, you are being exposed to that wavelength.
Yeah, for sure.
Allay wavelength right now. It's just that you're also being exposed to all the other wavelengths of light. And so there is, you're being exposed to it all day. So, there is no harm in it. It will send smaller electrical signals to your brain, which we now know is how it works, which will calm you down. So I guess if you have to be doing something really intense, maybe it's not great to be just in the Allay wavelength of light. But no, it's just a part of the visible spectrum, so it's not doing any harm.
So to the consumers out there, would you recommend all surrounding lights to be off and just the Allay lamp to be on, or how does that look?
Yes, and more than a recommendation, you have to be, you have to have all other lights off.
Okay.
Because anytime you're exposing to any of the, especially red and blue, other spectrums of light, you're activating other parts of your brain that increase the electrical activity. And so that offsets the lower signals that from the green specific spectrum of green. So one of the things that we often get asked is, can I use my laptop or watch TV while I have the light on? And the unfortunate answer is no, because I mean, it's still better than being in normal light, but if you have a migraine and you truly want the headache to go down, you need to truly just isolate to just this spectrum, and that's when the real magic happens.
Once the lamp was developed at this time, what were your main forms of advertising? You said Dr. Burstein kind of brought you on to send it out to everyone you can. So what did that look like?
Yeah, so the company was started with its two founders of UrbanStems and one of the people on the founding team of Hubble Contacts. And so between the three of us, we've had a lot of experience with direct-to-consumer marketing. And so our goal, part of the reason why Dr. Burstein wanted to work with us is we know how to reach consumers. We've done it before. We know the playbook. And in a lot of ways, a lot of it is replicable. And so we have done that, and it's been, quite successful. I think one thing though that we have learned is this device or this, Allay is very different than your typical direct-to-consumer brand where what it is known. So in the case of flowers or contact lenses, people are already searching for that. So you just have to be the best at getting in front of the consumer when they're searching for it. No one is searching for narrowband green light because no one really knows about it yet. That's obviously changed in the past couple of months, but when we launched, no one knew anything about narrowband green light, and so we had to do education plus selling instead of just selling, and so that was a bit of a learning curve for us. In that, especially in the field of migraines, there's just so much snake oil out there. So many things that are sold that claim to help with migraines that really have no research behind them. And we're rolling in with a very well-researched, multiple studies at Harvard Medical School, multiple papers published on this. We're rolling in, we kind of thought like, oh, we have, this is obviously legitimate. We have everything behind us, but there's still, when there's so much noise out there, as a consumer, especially as someone who has a migraine, who is advertised a lot of different things, you're understandably skeptical about, everything you see. Yeah. And so the education piece plus the selling took a different strategy than we had initially anticipated, and it really hinged on us, ingraining the migraine influencers, the people who write about migraines every day, who talk about it every day, really getting them to try the device and fall in love with it, and talk about it, which help bring overall general knowledge to it. This idea that a wavelength of light can help reduce your headache.
So is Allay Lamp sold 100% through e-commerce at this time?
Yes, yeah, with no plans on being in retail. We think it's the easiest way for us to reach the most amount of people possible, and obviously it's our roots, so we're a little biased. But we believe we can reach virtually everyone without ever having to go to a store.
For sure. So I wrap up each episode with this: if you could share one piece of advice with an aspiring entrepreneur, maybe something you've learned or regret, what would that be?
I feel like we could spend the entire podcast talking just about this. The number of lessons that I have learned over the years, the number of mistakes I've made and lessons I've learned are quite big. I'll start with one that with one that I think it took me the longest to learn, which is you need to take care of yourself first. There is a huge, culture in the startup world built around hustle and, sacrifice yourself and sacrifice your happiness for the company, which is almost taken as fact these days by, I think, young entrepreneurs, and certainly by me when, I started my companies. And it could not be more wrong. It is easy, and it's easy to see why we fall into it. When we take external money, when we have a team of people whose jobs rely on our decisions, we tend to just overwork and sacrifice everything in our personal lives to make the company successful, or at least doing what we think is making the company successful. But what you're actually doing is just wearing yourself down and making worse decisions. And every decision we make as an entrepreneur is usually a fairly big one and fairly important one. And if you are worn down and, operating at 80%, you are not going to be successful. I think the way to be most successful is to have, fill up your own cup first. Especially entrepreneurs are doing it, are doing it because they're incredibly talented and, can think of things that others can't. You can't do that if you're just constantly struggling to, keep your head above water.
For sure. Well, AJ, thank you so much for joining me. And to the listeners out there, make sure to check out Allay Lamp at allaylamp.com. Hey, thank you for listening to this episode of Starting Small. If you would, leave a review on whatever platform you are listening on. Also, follow Starting Small Pod on social platforms to keep up to date on future guests.